What is going on, Devils fans? It is, as always, your host, your best friend, your confidant, your number one source, Neil Villapiano, and welcome to another edition of the Devil's State of Mind podcast, right here on the Hockey Podcast Network, as well as SportsWire Radio, the best place to get everything you need to know about this team really needs a goalie and defense so bad, New Jersey Devils. And as always, guys, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to check these episodes out. Greatly appreciated. This is the first episode of the month of December. If you can believe it, it is December now. We are into the final full calendar month of the year 2023, and it has been quite the year for the New Jersey Devils over the last 12 months or so. But right now, despite winning 3 of their last 4, the vibe is still not where it needs to be, and the Devils are continuing to deal with much adversity. Some of it is self-inflicted, and we'll get into all of that. But before we do that, make sure, as always, guys, here on YouTube to leave a like on the video. Also, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you get notified every time a new episode comes up right here. Really do appreciate it. Also, as always, make sure to go check out the podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Google, all that good stuff. Make sure to go check it out over there and listen to it. And leave a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify. Really does help out the channel. And also shout out to all of our lovely sponsors. We got SeatGeek. $20 off your first purchase when you use my code Devil's State of Mind at SeatGeek. DraftKings Sportsbook, the official sports betting partner of the Devil's State of Mind podcast, and THPN. And with so many different sports going on, hockey, the NBA, NHL, obviously the NBA, you got obviously the NFL going on. And of course, now that we have some word about the college football playoff and all of the bowl games set, very exciting month of college football coming ahead. And so with all that going on, DraftKings, number one place to get in on all the huge cash prizes when you sign up and use our promo code THPN. And also shout out to Horns and Tail Napa Valley, the official wine club of the New Jersey Devils and the official wine sponsor of the Devil's State of Mind podcast. Use promo code Devil's State to get 10% off every single one of your orders for some best tasting wine with some really cool Devil designed bottles. It is the perfect gift for the Devils fan in your life. So as always, shout out to all of our sponsors. Devils fans, we have a very special guest joining us here on this edition of the Devil's State of Mind podcast. And I'm going to do something a little bit different. We're obviously going to talk about the last 2 games for the Devils. We're going to look ahead to next week. The Devils dealing with injuries yet again, and another major impact player who could be out for quite some time. But other than we are talking about that, obviously, we are also going to be talking about some college football. And I have a very special guest joining us. It is with great pleasure that we welcome on John from College Football Talk Daily. John, welcome to the Devil's State of Mind podcast. First and foremost, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing good, Neil. Thank you for having me. Pleasure to talk about the Devils.
Awesome, man. And we are excited to have you on, not only talking about the Devils, but also at the back end of this episode, we'll get our fans a little interested in what's going on in the college football world, because we got a lot to talk about, especially after a lot of today's announcements for sure. But let's obviously start by talking and recapping the last 2 games for the Devils. So the last 2 games were against the Flyers and the San Jose Sharks. So we'll start with the game in Philadelphia, back on Thursday night in Philadelphia, as the Devils, despite blowing a 2-goal lead in the third, came away with a 4-3 win in overtime to beat the Philadelphia Flyers. This was the first game that the Devils played without Dougie Hamilton, who sustained an injury on Tuesday against the Islanders. Sam LaBerge made his NHL debut. Didn't do very much, to say the least, but 26-year-old from Utica making his NHL debut. With that win, the Devils moved their winning streak to 3 in a row. And Akira Schmidt, with arguably certainly the most saves he's ever had to make in a game, as he stopped a career-high 44 out of 47 shots. Alexander Holtz and Jack Hughes with goals in the first. Tyler Toffoli got a goal on the power play in the third period. And Luke Hughes, who got hurt or appeared to be banged up after a hit from Garnett Hathaway, which resulted in a game misconduct and having Garnett Hathaway be thrown out of the game. Luke Hughes did not play the rest of that first period, but did return and played the rest of the game and karma's a little bit of the B word as he ended up getting the game-winning goal on a 2-on-1 with his brother Jack, scoring it 28 seconds in to win the game in overtime. And one last thing to mention, Brendan Smith is now serving a 2-game suspension after a high-stick swipe that he hit on Travis Konechny. Konechny was also fined $5,000 for basically instigating. Devils ended up taking a penalty on that, and it eventually cost the Devils a goal, but it didn't cost them the game. So overall, Devils were able to find a way to get themselves another win in the Metropolitan Division to get themselves to 3 wins in a row. So, John, really quickly here, your thoughts from the Devils win in Philadelphia back on Thursday.
Well, in hindsight, I would say that I think Schmid played probably the best game by Devils goalie of the season. Don't want to jump ahead, but I wish he could have followed it up a little bit better. But I think the Devils showed some good resilience and fight coming back after blowing the lead and then just ending it quickly in overtime.
Yeah, for sure. And your thoughts on the hit that Luke Hughes suffered from Garnet Hathaway? Do you feel that it was deserving of a game misconduct? Do you think it was a penalty at all? Because the argument, and I agree with it, that the refs really took way too long to blow the whistle there, and Luke Hughes was not prepared to basically get run over in that situation because he assumed that the whistle would be blown before him. But what are your thoughts on that hit?
I think it should have been a minor penalty. I don't think it was. I don't think he meant to hurt him. And I think it was more on the refs, like I said, for not blowing the whistle quick. I think it was an unfortunate situation. It should have been blown down a little earlier. And obviously Hughes wasn't ready for it, and Hathaway just, he was playing to the whistle.
Yeah, and I agree as well that it really, I felt the game misconduct was overkill. That didn't end up costing the Flyers the game. The Flyers were actually able to kill off that 5-minute power play that the Devils had. So certainly didn't really change the effect of the game. And Luke Hughes was able to come back and play the rest of that game, which I think is important. And Luke Hughes said after the game himself that he was very fortunate he didn't get hurt on that. So maybe he got the wind knocked out of him. Mm-hmm. Who knows? Some people are speculating he popped his shoulder back in after hurting it. Who really knows exactly what Luke dealt with in that situation? But the bottom line is Devils get the win and get themselves to 3 straight wins. So now we shift to less than 24 hours later. The Devils are back home for their final home game for a while, because after this game, the Devils go on a 4-game road trip, and their next home game will not be for about 9 days, December 13th, middle of the week against the Bruins. But the Devils were going up against the San Jose Sharks in what a lot of people looked at as a pretty winnable game, considering the Sharks were coming in with just 5 wins on the year. They hadn't won a road game yet up until this point. And with the Devils on a 3-game winning streak, this felt like another really good opportunity to get a win, get that streak to 4, and get some more momentum going into this big road trip coming up. A couple of things I want to mention that we got word of prior to this game. First and foremost, we finally get Simon Nemec into the National Hockey League. He was called up prior to this game and made his NHL debut. Really did not disappoint. He had some moments where he wasn't tremendous on the back end, but I think overall he played pretty well. He ended up with 2 assists, so he already has his first 2 NHL points out of the way. So very, very exciting there. But it does come at a cost, as it was announced that Dougie Hamilton is going to be out indefinitely after having surgery on a torn left pectoral muscle. He was placed on IR retroactive to November 28th when he got hurt against the Islanders. And so there's a reason now why Simon Nemec was called up, more for an emergency purpose really than anything else. But John, first, kind of a 2-parter here. First thoughts on Simon Nemec's first NHL game, and then the news about Dougie Hamilton.
I thought Nemec played pretty solid for his first NHL game, not being in the plans. Obviously, it was Dougie's injury that brought him up. So I think for being thrown into the fire, basically, he played pretty good. I mean, he definitely wasn't the worst defenseman on the ice that night. So I think he played pretty good. His first 2 points being out of the way, he kept the puck moving, and I liked that he was taking a lot of shots, which was pretty good because we're gonna need someone to take Dougie's role.
Yeah, for sure. And then obviously talking about the loss of Dougie Hamilton. Now, this injury is a little, it could go either way. Some people have speculated it could take several months for Dougie to come back. It doesn't appear to be. It doesn't appear to be season ending, but it's still going to be a pretty good amount of time before Dougie's even able to get back on the ice. So, I mean, what is the impact of Dougie Hamilton being out of the lineup?
I think obviously he's not on power play one anymore because Luke has been there, but he is a leader of the team. I mean, obviously we paid him all that money for a reason. He's a good puck moving defenseman, and when he's on, he's pretty solid. Obviously, he's had some defensive lapses this season, but the team as a whole has not been the best defensively this year. But you can't understate the impact he brings to the team. Like I think he's kind of like how Hughes and Heisha are. When he's on the ice, the team just plays a lot more confident.
So once again, the Devils will continue to deal with the major injury bug, particularly to key players. Another injury report came out at the exact same time. Tomas Nosek, again, dealing with already his second injury of the year, is out indefinitely after he had surgery on his right foot. And he aggravated this right foot injury that he actually originally injured in our second game of the year back on October 13th at home against the Arizona Coyotes, caused him to miss 10 games. Then he got hit on a hit from Jacob Trouba a couple weeks ago, and actually that's what I assumed what he was dealing with, but I guess that was not the problem. The problem was that he re-injured his foot, and now he's going to be out, and neither one of these players has any sort of timeline as to when they're coming back. Not much to say about Tomas Nosek, not because he's been bad, but he's barely played. It seems like every time he finally gets back in the lineup, he gets hurt. He's been very good on the face-off dot, but that's about it. And that's unfortunate that, his season has really, really been slowed down due to injuries. We'll see if and when him and also Dougie Hamilton are able to come back. The good news, though, another good piece of news, John, was Timo Meier made his return back to the lineup against his former team, first time against the San Jose Sharks since being traded at last year's deadline. So, again, you get Nemec back. Well, you get Nemec, and then you get Timo Meier back, but you lose. On the other hand, you lose Dougie Hamilton and you lose Tomas Nosek. So hopefully guys can find ways, next man up mentality and, continue to try to help this team move forward. That was not the case. That did not happen in this game against the Sharks, as I was in attendance for this one, unfortunately, and the Devils got their ass handed to them as they lost 6-3 at home to the San Jose Sharks. This was also the return of Mackenzie Blackwood, Fabian Zelin, and Nikita Ahudtuk. Blackwood did not start in net for the Sharks in this one. Zelin did play. Nikita Ahudtuk took a penalty in this game. So not much to really say from those guys. There wasn't much of a tribute to any of them anyway. Even welcoming him back, it was kind of a half-hearted thing anyway. But simply put, John, the Devils did not show up in this game. They really didn't. And it seemed like every time the Devils scored, they gave one or two right back. And it was just unbelievably frustrating. Akira Schmidt looked awful. The defense was putrid, as I've talked about. And again, first road win of the year for the Sharks, just their sixth win overall. Bad game. Really bad game, and kind of knock off a lot of the good vibes that the Devils were getting after those previous three games. So, I mean, again, John, your overall thoughts on that really disheartening loss to the Sharks at home?
Well, a few things I want to say about this. One, I saw on Twitter before the game that Fabian Zetterlund said, "I hope they don't boo me," and that kind of broke me a little bit because I loved Zetterlund when he was a Devil. But I will say, like I said, this was a disappointing game for sure, and it can't be overstated. The Devils need goaltending. That's what it is. I mean, like I said, Schmidt had 55 saves the night before?
He had 44 saves the night before. 44 on 47.
Yeah. So he had 44 saves the night before. I think it comes down to coaching. He shouldn't have been in net. I mean, the Sharks are not world beaters by any means. I mean, they're playing better as of late, but Vanacek should have been in there unless you've lost all hope in him. But I just don't see why you start a young goaltender after 47 shots being faced the next night in a back-to-back.
And you bring up a really good point, and that's kind of where I want to ask you the next question, John, is this. I think it's fair to say that Schmidt getting the start in back-to-back games, second half of a back-to-back, kind of shows you where the Devils' faith is in Vitek right now. Vitek Vanacek, I don't recall the last time he really had a good game. Yeah, he won that game against the Sabres last Saturday again in the 7-2 win, but he barely saw a lot of shots in that game, and they still gave up 2 goals. So would it be fair to say, in your opinion, John, that Vitek's confidence is basically at zero at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I think both of I think the Devils are in a really tough spot because Vitek, obviously this coaching staff doesn't have the confidence in him to play him right now, or they would have played him Friday night against the Sharks. which I think could have been a good tune-up game for him. But Schmid also now, I mean, if he can't do back-to-backs, like we're in a real pickle. I wish Nico Dawes was healthy, maybe rotate him in for a game, but I feel like we don't really have an answer right now.
We certainly don't. And I agree with a lot of people that I think this is one of the knocks on general manager Tom Fitzgerald, that he wasn't aggressive enough helping the Devils on the back end, whether that was on defense or even and certainly in net. And now he's paying the price for it. And there aren't a whole lot of options. And we're actually going to talk about some potential options the Devils could go after in trade or even via free agency that maybe could potentially help this team, even in little ways, to just get them back on track and get them to be a more consistent team. Because right now, things just do not look like they're improving whatsoever. And I think we're beyond the point of saying that it's early. Again, they haven't even played 25 games yet, but you got to get going at some point, because the longer that you wait and the longer that you don't have success, the harder it's going to be to come back in the second half of the year to try to make a late push to sneak into the playoffs. So, yeah, really, really disheartening loss against the Sharks. So the Devils finished with a relatively solid week of hockey. They finished 2-1. Was just hoping that they would finish with a perfect week. I think that would have been ideal. And so the Devils leave Prudential Center for a while on a little bit of a low note. And that kind of brings me to the next thing. John, we take a look at the next week of games starting on Tuesday. The first battle of all of the Hughes brothers, Jack, Quinn, and Luke, all matching up on Tuesday night in Vancouver, 10 p.m. start time. I know, Devils fans. It's not great when we have to stay up mad late to watch our team play. 2 nights later, on national TV, I might add, the Devils are in Seattle against the Kraken, the struggling Seattle Kraken. 10:30 p.m. start time. So this will be the second of 2 nationally televised games that night. And then the Devils have back-to-backs in Alberta. First in Calgary, 4 p.m. start. And then on Sunday, also 4 p.m. start, this time against the Edmonton Oilers. So, John, when you look at these 4 games, what are your honest overall feelings about the Devils' chances to make this a successful road trip coming up?
So I think a successful road trip for the Devils, I think the goal should be 3-1. I think right now I lean that we lose the battle of the Hughes brothers. I just think the Canucks are firing on all cylinders right now, and the Devils, I mean, lack of a better word, aren't. The Kraken are struggling though, so I think we could beat the Kraken. And then the Flames and Oilers are kind of just the Oilers are also in a pickle, so I feel like we could beat them while they're down. And the Flames, they play tough, but I think we could beat them. So I think 3-1's reasonable, but we can't have another disappointing loss. We can't. If we lose 2 or 3, that's going to be a bad week.
For sure. And I think, again, it's crazy that with the way this year has gone, that we look at the first game against the Canucks and say to ourselves, it's going to be tough because, again, the Canucks have been really good. They just pulled off that trade for Nikita Zadorov for basically nothing. I mean, a heck of a move by Vancouver to definitely bolster their back end, be a little bit more physical. They actually now, with the addition of Zadorov and him being paired with Tyler Myers, they have the tallest and biggest defensive pairing in the National Hockey League. So not something that's going to be thrilling for the Devils to be looking at when they take on Vancouver in that game. But I think it's going to be a lot of fun regardless, and hopefully the Devils can get off to a good start. And like you mentioned, Seattle's been struggling. Calgary, I mean, they're still very much in it. I mean, they're playing decent hockey, but that should be a win. And you look at Edmonton, I mean, if you're able to slow down McDavid and Draisaitl and just pepper their goaltending with shots, you give yourself a really good chance to win the game. And the Oilers are not, while they're playing better, they're still not anywhere near where they need to be. So again, I think overall this is we are hopeful that this is going to be a successful road trip coming up, but it's going to start with that Tuesday game against the Canucks, and hopefully they can get off to a good start. So now that we've kind of gotten how the Devils did the rest of this week, and obviously looking ahead to this week, I want to talk to you a little bit about trade targets. And I think it's, at this point in the season, I think it's good enough to really talk about what type of options the Devils have. I don't really think you're going to see them make a move for a forward. Quite frankly, they don't need another forward. Nowhere in their lineup are they lacking a good forward. Even putting Brendan Smith on a fourth line ends up actually working out in our favor. He's played better as a forward than he has a defenseman. But clearly, the options need to be focusing on the goaltending and also on the back end in our defensive core. So I want to throw a couple names at you, John, and kind of get your thoughts on each one. All three of these guys are low risk and most likely going to be like medium reward. Like these are not groundbreaking moves by any means, but these are guys that have experience in the league and have shown to be pretty reliable in some capacity and would certainly upgrade the Devils' goaltending. And the first guy I want to talk about is Jake Allen from the Montreal Canadiens. This is a guy that his name has been thrown around to several teams that are goaltending friendly. And, the Canadiens are obviously struggling towards the bottom of the Atlantic Division. They're most likely going to be sellers at the deadline. And I think Jake Allen's going to be somewhat of a hot commodity to teams who need a goaltender. One of them is the Devils. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on maybe pursuing Jake Allen in a trade to boost the goaltending?
I think Jake Allen would be solid. He's a veteran, like you said. He's made it to the playoffs. He's been on good teams before. But I think regardless of who the Devils go for, it has to be before the deadline. I don't think this can wait. I think this is a pressing issue for the Devils, and that the longer it goes on, the more losses that are going to be on the goalies.
Yeah, and I think again, we've talked about it, several times over that. Really, all of these moves are going to be based around guys that may not be here for very long, but are going to be hopefully good enough to kind of just stabilize the goaltending kind of moving forward. And so, really it's just about looking at different options. And that brings up the next guy that I want to get your thoughts on, and that is James Reimer, aka Optimus Rhyme, who I think people forget that he's still in the league. Right now, he is the third goalie option for the most part. He's been the backup / third goalie option for the Detroit Red Wings. Now, the Red Wings, again, are going to be one of those teams that they carry three goaltenders, so it would behoove of them to make a move to trade one of them. And I think Reimer's going to be the most likely guy on the move. He has always been a pretty reliable goaltender. He's never really been, the only time that maybe he got a lot of criticism was the lack of playoff success when he was in Toronto. But you look at you look at James Reimer so far. He has played in 6 games, 2 wins, does have a shutout, has a 2.30 goals against average and a .917 save percentage. Not a lot of work, but comparatively to what we've seen from both Vitek and Akira already from a stats perspective, he's already looks like a better option in some degrees. And he plays pretty big in the net, which I think also would certainly help out. So what do you think of James Reimer from Detroit?
Actually, I think Reimer, out of the 3, I think Reimer is probably the best option. Like you said, he's small sample size this year, of course. But, again, veteran, I think he's a guy who, if he doesn't play every night, he's not going to be rattled. If he has a bad game, it's not going to, wear on him as much because he's been around a long time. He's lost games. He's let up 4 or 5 goals in a game, and, you bounce back. And we said he has a shutout this year. If the Devils could even, his goals against average 2 goals a game, we score 3 or 4 goals a game. That's fine. We could. Anyone around, if you're hovering around a 2, we could work with that.
And I think, again, we kind of go off of what people were saying about the Devils prior to the start of last season, which was if the Devils get league average goaltending, they're right in the playoffs. And again, it's the same situation here. If the Devils can get to league average goaltending or even a bit above, with the offense that they have and what they're capable of doing on a night-to-night basis, they're going to be able to win a lot more games and have a lot more consistent success, which is certainly what the Devils are looking for. Now, the third and final guy who the Devils literally just saw a few nights ago and ended up stopping 44 of 47 shots against the Devils is San Jose Sharks goaltender Kaapo Kähkönen, who did not play in the last game against the Rangers on Sunday, but he is coming off that win. He's actually won 3 of his last 4 starts, which actually finally got him to wins. He's won 3 of the 10 games that he's played, has a 3.99 goals against average and a .896 save percentage, which it's pretty similar to what we've seen from Akira and Vitek. Now, there is going to be one thing to just keep in mind. He has been playing with the San Jose Sharks, who, again, just 6 wins up until this point, have arguably the worst defense overall and the worst team overall in the league. So you do wonder how much is it on Capo Kakinen and how much is it on the Sharks themselves. So, again, this is not a sexy, flashy option. This may not even be the right option to go for, but it is something that, maybe 27 years old, he's got a decent amount of experience, perhaps could help. I mean, your thoughts on Capo Kakinen?
I'm getting a little PTSD from the other night already, just looking at Kakinen, but I feel like he's kind of a lateral move. I feel like he kind of puts us back he's on the same level as Vanacek and Schmid, kind of, because it's hard to tell, like you said, the Sharks are so bad this year that it's hard to evaluate individual players, especially a goaltender, because, they're getting a lot of work.
Right.
I feel like the Devils would be better with a veteran, though, someone who they could, doesn't have to play every night, and he can come in relief, or if he has to start 3 or 4 games in a row, he could do it.
Yeah, and I feel like Capo Kakinen would be a guy that maybe we get as a last minute thing. I think about some of the goalies that Fitzgerald had to bring in towards the end of the season 2 years ago, and you kind of you don't really have sort of a reaction to it. You just kind of go ho hum, it's really, he's not very good. Is it really going to help us? This, that, and the other thing, but
the Louis Domingue effect.
Exactly. And I like how you mentioned it's like a lateral move. It feels a lot like what we already have. And that's exactly what I think the Devils don't want to do. But again, those are just 3 options. Yaroslav Halak, who just got released from his PTO in Carolina, is available. That is a guy that I think, from a veteran perspective, there's no more veteran than you can get than Yaroslav Halak right now, who's still a pretty solid netminder despite being high up there in age. There's obviously going to be other options out there potentially. I know people want me to talk about John Gibson or Yusei Saros, but John Gibson's contract is abysmal right now. We would be taking on for several years, and I don't think that that's what we need to be doing. Yusei Saros, if he becomes available at the deadline, I think the Devils should absolutely put the full court press on getting him. But even though the Predators are only 11-11 right now, it just sounds like to me more likely that the Predators want to keep him around long term. So again, things could change. Attitudes can change. A lot to get to before we get to the deadline. Although I do think the Devils need to make some moves way before the deadline. But we shall see. So now I want to shift quickly here to 3 potential candidates to acquire as on the defensive side. And again, I know that the Devils have guys already in the lineup and everything like that, but clearly the Devils need more. There's clearly needs to be more of a move that needs to be made one way or the other. And there's a couple of guys that kind of stick out to me, and I want to get your thoughts on as well, John. And the first guy is a guy that, especially after Zadorov got traded, is now probably the number 1 guy on the defensemen that is on this list, and that is Noah Hanifin, also from the Calgary Flames. 5 goals, 7 assists for 12 points on the year with a relatively surprising plus-minus of +3. And, when you think about it, he's a guy that, again, I think would be a semi-splash move. It would be wow, we were able to get Noah Hanifin. That's a big move. He's a good, left shooting defenseman. He can be pretty physical overall. So definitely not a bad move by any means. I'm trying to think of where his contract is. For some reason, I'm not getting the information, but I'll look at it in just a second. But do you feel that Noah Hanifin is the biggest guy the Devils need to be looking at for defensive help?
I don't, but I think okay, how can I put this? I think he's the best defenseman available on the market, probably, being shopped, but I don't think he's the best fit for the Devils.
And why?
I think the Devils need more of I just feel like right now we have too many of the same type of defensemen, right? If you look at defensemen like archetypes, I feel like we have too many smaller, puck-moving, offensive-minded guys. Hanifin is a little more two-way, but I feel like we just need a defensive guy that's okay just, being a shot blocker, okay being on a shutdown pair. Because right now, if it's late in the game and we're down, we don't really, we could put out Siegenthaler and Ball, I guess, but Siegenthaler's not having the best year either. So I think we just need a guy that can eat up defensive zone minutes.
Yeah, and I think that adding a guy like Noah Hanifin I don't think it would end up costing the Devils a lot to acquire him. I mean, considering what the Canucks didn't have to give up to get Zadorov, who I would argue to say maybe is of lesser talent than Noah Hannafin. Hannafin has made it pretty clear that he does not want to be in Calgary moving forward. So he is definitely going to be moved at some point at the trade deadline. And it should be mentioned that this is the final year of his contract. He will be an unrestricted free agent. So it's very possible this could be a rental move for any sort of contender. But I think even though he may not necessarily fit the Devils' mold and Devils' system, I think he's still somebody that the Devils should certainly keep their eye on and look to maybe acquire about. I'm sure maybe the Devils have already spoken to Calgary. They've already had a good relationship with the move to get Tyler Toffoli and things like that. So, we'll keep that in mind. And now I want to stick with talking again about the Calgary Flames because, again, they are clearly in a selling mode. Despite where they are in the standings, they are clearly in a mode of they want to gain assets to rebuild. I don't think there's any way else that we can describe it. And so the next guy that comes up again from the Calgary Flames is Chris Tanev, another defensive. 1 goal, 6 assists, 7 points, has a better plus minus than Noah Hannafin. He has a plus minus of +5, which is kind of interesting. And again, I don't know where they're getting how their plus minuses are actually pretty good considering Calgary's not tremendous. Now, again, same thing with Noah Hannafin. He is an unrestricted free agent at the end of the year. Now, I did want to mention this before. It is possible the Devils put Dougie Hamilton on LTIR, long-term IR. If that is the case, the Devils then open up about $9 million in cap space, which means regardless of whether they go after Noah Hannafin or even Tanev, despite their cap hit, they would have more than enough money to afford them to come onto the books and go from there. But I mean, overall, I think this seems like for a lot of people from a defensive perspective, John, that this is the guy the Devils need to be trying to go after.
Yeah, so I think so. Like originally, I liked Zadorov. He's a big physical defenseman. Obviously, he's off the market. But one thing he did was he set the market kind of low for rental defensemen right now. I mean, the Devils. I mean, what was he trade for? Was it a third?
It was a third and a fifth.
Yeah, so a third and a fifth. We can part ways with that for a defensive defenseman right now. Okay, we're not going to be a fifth round pick is not going to be making an impact right away for the Devils right now. So I feel like Tanayev is probably the guy. Hannafin is good. Like I would be okay with that too. But I think Tanayev fits our need more of a guy that, on the penalty kill, you can put him and Brendan Smith out there, or if it's late in the game, you could put him and Ball and just have a physical defensive pair. Plus, come the playoffs, Tanayev is a physical defenseman. So if we're gonna get there, and we run into the Trouba train again, we have someone that can also play the physical game.
And Tanev's always been a very respected type of player, very, like you mentioned, a physical player, a guy who could also block shots really well. All the things that we need to get that better support back there and just be able to be more reliable in our own zone. So, again, would not be surprised to see the Devils looking at Calgary again for reinforcements, particularly on the defensive side. Now, there is one other guy that kind of came up, and he actually plays within the Metropolitan Division, and he ended up actually just playing against the Devils back on Thursday, got a goal against the Devils, and that is Philadelphia Flyers defenseman Sean Walker. Now, a lot of people might say, who the hell is this guy, and why should I care? Well, so far through 24 games, 3 goals, 8 assists, 11 points, and a plus minus of +7. He is one of the bigger reasons on the defensive side why the Flyers have been able to have the success they've had up until this point. Now, full disclosure, he does have 1 assist so far in the last couple of games, so he hasn't done a whole lot on the offensive side. But again, these are all guys that we're looking more for to be helping us out, locking down on the defensive end of it. Now, again, another guy that his contract comes up at the end of the year, he's only making about $2.7 million this season. So he's a little bit cheaper than the other 2 guys that we just mentioned. Another guy that could be an under-the-radar move that the Devils make, but actually can end up being very beneficial moving on for the rest of the season. So what are your thoughts? I know there's not a whole lot to work with, John, but your thoughts on maybe going after someone within the division in Sean Walker?
Well, I think Walker, he's an okay defenseman. Like I said, he had a goal against us. I think Walker would probably cost the least out of the 3 to acquire. That's if the Flyers don't ask for more for being in the division. But I feel like he's probably the most low-risk move just because it would cost the least to acquire him. Obviously, if we acquire Tanayev or Hannafin, we're expecting big minutes out of them. And you're going to rely on them a lot more. Where Walker is probably more of a second or third pairing defenseman.
So again, and the thing with the Flyers is that, look, they could still be in a playoff spot by the time the trade deadline comes around, and they may not want to move Sean Walker, but he's a guy that could certainly be on the move. People have talked about him as a guy that at the end of the year or at the deadline, they just move to try to get something for him and go from there. And maybe the Devils, if they're in a good position, maybe they find a way to pick him up, don't have to give up a ton again, and just try to make, solid moves that just make the defense as a whole a lot better, which again is one of more of the big things that we're looking for. So again, a lot of options. Doesn't seem like a lot of big name options. Things can certainly change over the next couple of months, but just some names to keep your eye on in the near future here as the Devils look to try to see if they can find some solutions on their back end. So now that we've talked a lot about the Devils, and everything like that, which is great, and we'll see what they can do. I want to talk to you a little bit about college football now. Full disclosure, CFB Talk Daily has a tremendous following over on Twitter. I would highly recommend you guys go follow them. I'll share their social media as well. They do a great job of covering everything you need to know about college football, regardless of what it is. They have certainly been busy today, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
As at the time of this recording, it is December 3rd. This was the day that we found out who would be in the college football playoff, as well as who would be, as well as, all the bowl games that are going on. And also, just want to make a little bit of a personal note. Both the people you are listening to are also big-time Rutgers Scarlet Knight fans, who Rutgers finally back in a bowl game, and we'll talk about them towards the end here. But I want to talk first to you, John, about the college football playoff, because we did have a little bit of controversy, and I said to myself, somebody's getting screwed today. I don't know who it is. Someone's getting screwed. And we'll start with the first of the two semifinal playoff games, and that is the Rose Bowl. And we have Alabama at number 4 taking on Michigan at number 1. That game will be on New Year's Day, 5 p.m. Eastern start time. That's the first of the two CFP playoff semifinals. So we'll kind of look at that. So we got Michigan against Alabama. And then when you look over to the second of the two semifinal games, a little bit more surprising, as the Texas Longhorns, for the first time, are in the college football playoff. They'll be taking on Michael Penix and the Washington Huskies in Sugar Bowl. Again, the winners of these two games will play in the national championship, which will be at NRG Stadium in Houston, Texas, on January 8th, 7:30 p.m. start time. So you have Alabama, Washington, Texas, and you got Michigan, Washington, Texas, and Alabama as your college football playoff. Georgia, the two-time defending national champions after losing in the SEC title game, are out. And the biggest controversy of them all, despite going 13-0 in the regular season and then losing both their starting and backup quarterbacks, the Florida State Seminoles did not make the CFP. They'll end up playing the Georgia Bulldogs in the Orange Bowl, or as some people put it, the we don't really want to be here bowl. So overall, John, your thoughts on this year's college football playoff matchups?
Well, to starters, I think we know who the Hughes brothers are going to be rooting for in this with
sure.
Michigan.
Yep.
I also kind of want Michigan to win, even though they're a controversial season to say the least. I just can't help but feel for the Florida State kids, though. They really got screwed. I mean, to put it in perspective, for those of you who don't watch college football, it would be like if the Devils had a historic season like last year, then Jack Hughes gets hurt before the playoffs, and the NHL was like, okay, well, we're going to put the 8th seed in over you guys. So
right.
I feel like that's how – I feel like they just got screwed. I mean, like, those kids worked so hard, and why play the games if going undefeated doesn't get you in?
Yeah.
And I think I like Texas. Obviously, I'm an Oregon guy too, so I don't really want Washington to win. But yeah, I think that's going to be a great game, Texas versus Washington. I'm excited to watch that. And I don't know if you saw the reaction of Michigan seeing they're playing Alabama.
I did see that.
I will, to say the least, they did not look the happiest to be getting Alabama.
Look, Alabama has been playing so well up until this point. They deserve to beat Georgia in the SEC title game, and they honestly do deserve a shot in the CFP. I think that they've earned that right. And it'll be really interesting. And I think Michigan's looking at it like, of all the teams to face off against, probably the two teams that Michigan didn't want to face in their CFP matchup was probably Alabama or Georgia. Clearly, they wanted Florida State. They knew it would give them the better matchup. But now they got about a month, got like a couple weeks to prepare for a Nick Saban-led team. It's going to be a fun one. And then you mentioned Washington and Texas. I mean, again, should be a really, really fun matchup. I think that game could go either way. I'm only rooting for Washington to win it all because with the Pac-12 no longer in existence after this year, I think it would be kind of great for the Pac-12 to get its first and only national championship in the CFP era in its last year of its existence. So nonetheless, going to be a lot of fun. And if you want to get in on this action, if you feel confident enough to make some picks, make sure to sign up with DraftKings using our promo code THPN and put some money down on who you think are going to win these college football playoff semifinal games. And of course, who will win the national championship. So kind of sticking with college football, the other big award really the biggest award out there for a lot of people that don't know is the Heisman Trophy. Now, the Heisman Trophy is basically like the Hart Trophy in the NHL. It is given to the best overall player in college football. And right now, I would say we have about 5 guys who are the likeliest to potentially take home that award. And I'll show you here, thanks to our friends over at DraftKings Sportsbook, the latest odds for the Heisman Trophy. So in first place, you have quarterback Jaden Daniels out of LSU at a minus 1,200. He is the favorite. Second favorite is Michael Penix out of Washington at a plus 900. Bo Nix, who just lost for the second time to Michael Penix in Washington in the Pac-12 title game. He's in third with a plus 1,500. You have Jalen Milroe, starting quarterback for Alabama, at plus 10,000. And Marvin Harrison Jr. out of Ohio State at a plus 20,000. So, Jaden Daniels, despite not playing in the SEC title game and obviously still having a great year, is the current favorite, according to DraftKings and a lot of odds, to win the Heisman Trophy. So, John, give me your thoughts on what you think is going to happen with this year's Heisman Trophy voting.
So, if you asked me on Thursday before the Washington-Oregon game, my pick probably would have been Bo Nix, maybe a little bit biased, being an Oregon guy.
Right.
But I think now the dilemma, I think it's Jaden Daniels' award to lose. I think the only thing you could argue is that, okay, they have a few losses, which, again, to put it in hockey terms, would be like McDavid winning the Hart. Edmonton wasn't a great team, but he had such great stats that you can't ignore that without him, they would have been so much worse. I think that's the same situation at LSU, is that without Jaden Daniels, this might have been a 5 or 6 loss team. So I think he put up historical numbers just like Connor McDavid did for his Hart. And I think you can't ignore the numbers. They're just too good.
Yeah, he really, really shot up the boards. I don't think a lot of people had Jaden Daniels on their boards to start the year, but as the year progressed, he got better and better. And this is a guy that could be very interesting to a lot of NFL teams that need a quarterback in terms of drafting. So, we'll see. I still think it's going to end up being Michael Penix. This is my personal pick. I think also just betting him at the second highest odds at plus 900, I think is a pretty good bet. I'm surprised JJ McCarthy isn't in there. Not saying that I think he deserves to be in there, but because of just the Michigan hype and everything, I would have thought that maybe he would be in there, but I guess not. Marvin Harrison Jr., I think if he had had a really good game against Michigan and they won, I think he would have jumped a lot higher, but it is not how it goes. Jalen Milroe got off to a slow start for Alabama, but has certainly elevated his play and is a big reason why Alabama is in the college football playoffs. So again, we showed you the odds sponsored by DraftKings as always. So make sure when you sign up for DraftKings, use our promo code THPN, that you can place a bet as well as to who you think is going to take home the college football player of the year. Now, last but certainly not least, kind of sticking in the Jersey realm, John, we got to talk a little bit about the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. Their football team finished 6-6, 3-6 in the Big Ten. They were 6-2 and ended the year, unfortunately, losing their last 4 to finish at an even 6-6. But they still clinched their first outright bowl berth since 2014 when they played against North Carolina in the Quicken Lanes Bowl in Detroit. And so, who are they playing? Well, it is a Big East rematch as we have Rutgers at Yankee Stadium in the Pinstripe Bowl, taking on the Miami Hurricanes. Now, a couple of interesting things here, John, which I'm sure you know. Greg Schiano, former defensive coordinator for University of Miami. Mario Cristobal, the head coach of Miami, is a former Rutgers defensive assistant from
Yep.
2001 to 2003. So a little bit of that. Rutgers is 0-11 all time against the University of Miami. This is when the Hurricanes were unbelievably dominant with some of the greatest players to play in college
Mm-hmm.
football and some great Hall of Fame players that played in the National Football League. So this should be a fun matchup. This will be on December 28th at Yankee Stadium, a 2:15 p.m. start time. And I know myself and John will certainly be there, no doubt. But John, give me your thoughts overall of Rutgers this season, finally getting back to a bowl game. Do you feel that progress has been made, or is there more to be desired?
So I guess it's time for me to eat crow because when Greg Schiano got hired, I was not the biggest fan of the hire. And you know what?
Okay.
I was wrong, and I'm okay to admit that I was wrong. He stabilized the program. He really wasn't working with a lot, and he got us to 6 wins and a bowl win. So I think he earns my respect now for sure. And I think this is a big step forward for the program. It's big. It's a lot easier to sell kids on 6-6 than 1 win a year or
Right.
watching them get blown out. So I think being able to compete and at least be 6-6, 500 team. We go to a bowl every year. That's a lot easier to sell. So I think it's a good stepping stone for the program, and I hope it continues because, I mean, there's some talented kids on this team. Powell, Kyle Monangai. This is a good football team.
And I think you do have to give some credit to Greg Schiano for the job that he's done to get Rutgers where it was during the Chris Hash era to where they are now. There is a lot of question marks still about the quarterback play from Gavin Wimsatt, the highest overall recruited player that Rutgers has ever gotten. Very much had some good moments, but also had some not so good moments. And the offense was the team's Achilles heel for sure, despite Kyle Monangai rushing for over 1,000 yards, the only player in the Big Ten to rush for over 1,000 yards. And I know we've talked about it a little bit, John, on social and things like that. Do you feel that Gavin Wimsatt is the guy, or do you feel that Rutgers needs to start looking in a different direction already?
So I'm not ready to give up on him, but kind of like the Devils goaltending situation, I think it's time this year you bring in a veteran to at least push him in training camp, maybe make him work a little bit harder because the talent is there. I mean, obviously you don't get to this point without being talented. I just think that maybe he's just knows there's no one else to replace him, so he doesn't really put the work in. But also, the offense really wasn't opened up to him, and Soraka's offense isn't obviously people have talked about it as it takes a few years to learn the offense. So I'm not ready to give up on him yet because I think he's still so young. I mean, I think you have to give him another year at least, but you don't bring in a guaranteed starter. You bring in someone that can give him a competition.
And you obviously do have some young guys backing him up, and a Johnny Shepard from New York, and you have AJ Serace coming in as well from New Jersey. But there are a lot of quarterbacks that are available in the transfer portal. I would
Yeah.
not be surprised if Rutgers is looking into it to kind of see what they can find. We did see that one of the Rutgers quarterbacks, their backup quarterback, actually is going to enter the transfer portal, which totally get considering the
Yeah.
situation. A lot of the guys that Rutgers will probably be losing in the transfer portal are guys that honestly and truly we're not going to see a lot of action, and they just
Mhm.
haven't been seeing a lot of action. So, are they losing anybody of great impact? No, but at the same time, you got to find a way to bring in some guys. They brought in Flip Dixon last year from Minnesota,
Mhm.
and I thought he had a really, really good year
Yeah,
under
yeah,
Joe
solid guy.
Harris-Miak's defense. Rutgers defense is going to continue to be good, especially with bringing back some guys like Tyrene Powell. But they got one last ride. They got one last game to go here, and hopefully they can finish the year on a high note with a winning record, 7 wins, and a pinstripe bowl win, which I think would be really important for a stepping stone for the program. So,
Absolutely.
let's go Rutgers. Let's
Yep.
chop, baby. So on
Keep
that note,
chopping.
yeah, absolutely. Keep chopping. But on that note, that's going to do it for us on this episode. John, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We really do appreciate it. Love your Devil's insight, but also your college football insight as well. Really, really appreciate it. But before I let you go, I do this with all of my guests. I like to roll out the red carpet and let them kind of tell the folks home where they could check you guys out and everything you got going on. So the floor is yours, my friend.
Oh, first off, thank you for having me on. I love talking about the Devils. I mean, I'm probably hockey fan than college football fan, to be honest. I mean, my room is red and white for the Devils. I have Devil stuff all in front of me here. Not many people want to talk about hockey, so I love to talk about it with who I can. You can follow me on Twitter at CFBTalkDaily. The podcast is starting up again this week, so that link will be in the Twitter bio, and come listen.
Absolutely. Make sure to go listen. If you are a college football fan or even a football fan in general or even a sports fan, would highly recommend you go check out the podcast when they get a new episode up, and looking forward to listening as well. But again, John, thank you so much, and we'll definitely have you on the podcast again soon.
Thank you, Neil. Have a great night.
Say something.
Bet the action on the ice with DraftKings Sportsbook, the official sports betting partner of the National Hockey League. Download the app now and use code THPN. New customers can get $150 instantly in bonus bets for betting just $5 on hockey. That's code THPN, only at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the National Hockey League. The crown is yours. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY to 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort. 21 plus age varies by jurisdiction, void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. See DraftKings.com/hockey for eligibility and deposit restrictions, terms, and responsible gambling resources. NHL and NHL Shield are registered trademarks of the National Hockey League. Copyright NHL 2023. All rights reserved.